Don't drink the water. That's what a little girl whispered to me one morning, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. And I'll tell you right now, that single warning from a child who wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the top floors of a hospital skyscraper saved my life. My name's Olivia, and for 20 years, I thought I was untouchable. Until I realized I'd been living in a cage built by people smiling to my face while slowly poisoning me behind closed doors. I remember my hand hovering over that glass pitcher in the boardroom. It was gleaming, sweating condensation placed perfectly at my seat, like it belonged to me. Geneva, the administrator with lipstick as red as blood, slid it closer and said, "You've been running on coffee all morning, Olivia." Her smile was thin, sharp, rehearsed. At the head of the table, Dr. Hale Charisma, wrapped in a tailored suit, watched me like a hawk. I'd been losing time forgetting names, feeling that fog he kept calling burnout. But in that moment I thought of the girl's napkin, just a sketch of a glass of water and a skull, and my hand froze. I looked up, smiled, and said, "I'm fine. I didn't drink." And I saw the flash of fury in their eyes when I refused. That was the first crack in their plan. Now, you wouldn't think a CEO and a janitor would ever end up in the same fight. But that night down in the basement, while I was still trying to hold my world together, Thomas Calder was just holding his daughter close. Lyra was only 9, but she'd overheard everything through a vent while she sat with her crayons. She told him what she'd heard. The last dose is in the pitcher. When she signs, she won't even know her own name. Imagine being a father hearing your kid say that and knowing she's right. He wanted to protect her, hide her. But instead, he picked up an empty vial from my office trash, double-bagged it like evidence, and made a choice. He wasn't just cleaning floors anymore, he was about to clean house. I found him. Or maybe we found each other. I tracked him down through the employee files, showed up at his door like some desperate stranger in heels, and a suit that suddenly felt like armor made of paper. He tried to shut me out, told me his daughter liked to play games. But when I whispered back, she told me not to drink the water. And she was right. The denial in his eyes cracked. He stepped aside, let me in, and laid a bagged vial on the table between us. For the first time in months, I felt less crazy, less alone. Right there in that tiny apartment with children's drawings on the fridge, a CEO and a janitor became allies. We knew we needed proof, more than a vial, more than a child's word. So we split the plan. I'd dig into the digital archives, hunt for a project Hale had buried years ago, something called Chimera. Thomas would do what nobody suspected a janitor of doing, use his master key slip through the halls invisible, and get inside Hale's office. That's where he found it, a strip of paper that missed the shredder and invoice from a private pharmacy. Neuromodulator, not vitamins, a chemical designed to scramble a brain. My brain. And then he heard it with his own ears. Hale on the phone. Midnight. Shred everything. That's when we went from playing defense to planning a heist. I called in a favor, triggered a fake server crash to pull Hale and Geneva away at 11:45. And while alarms blared upstairs, Thomas and I crawled through a service tunnel, headlamps cutting through dust, until we dropped into the deep storage vault. It felt like breaking into a tomb. Box after box, row after row, and then we found it. Project Chimera. Patient files, photographs, death certificates. People who had come in hopeful and left broken. Notes about tremors, paralysis, decline. And at the bottom of every form, my forged signature. He had buried me right along with them. I barely had time to breathe before the door hissed open. Security, floodlights, and there was Hale smiling like he'd already won. "This is a sad new low," he said, pretending sympathy. He told the guards to escort me to psychiatric evaluation, call me unstable, paranoid, done. Thomas stepped in front of me, pry bar in hand, growling, "Stay back." For a man who mopped floors, he stood like a soldier. And in that frozen second, we both knew we wouldn't be leaving together. He shoved the files into my hands, smashed a pipe, and filled the vault with choking white gas. "Run!" he shouted, and they dragged him down while I crawled through the shaft, clutching the evidence to my chest, sobbing his name. I didn't stop running until I reached a safe condo nobody knew about. I spread the files across a coffee table, photographed every page. And then I called in another ally, Julian Hayes, an attorney who doesn't scare easy. He took one look at the evidence and said, "This isn't just corporate fraud. This is conspiracy to commit murder." Within hours, the FBI had warrants. At the same time, I made sure Lyra was safe. I'll never forget the moment she walked into that condo clutching her teddy bear, whispering, "Where's my dad?" I pulled her close and promised, "He's a superhero, and we're going to bring him home." The next day, the hospital's glass walls shook with something it had never seen before: federal agents storming the executive offices. Hale and Geneva sat smug talking about how I'd be suspended, how Thomas would break. And then a badge flashed in their faces. "We have a warrant," the agent said. And just like that, their empire cracked. At the same time, down in a locked room, Thomas lifted his head when the door opened. Not to Hale, but to agents in tactical vests. "You're safe now," they told him. He walked out into the light, bruised but unbroken, and the first person waiting was me. "You came back for me," he whispered. "I promised," I said. And when Lyra ran into his arms, the cage shattered for good. Months later, the headlines faded. Hale and Geneva got life sentences. The hospital set up a restitution fund for the families of Project Chimera. I stepped down, and Thomas stepped up, no longer a janitor, but the director of a foundation fighting for patients who can't fight for themselves. And me, I found peace not in boardrooms, but on a porch swing watching Lyra laugh in the snow with a puppy she named Justice. But here's the part that still lingers with me. None of it would have happened if a little girl hadn't whispered to a stranger, "Don't drink the water." If her father hadn't believed her even when the world wouldn't. If I hadn't chosen to trust the one man everyone overlooked. So now I ask you, what do you think? Was Thomas right to risk everything, even his daughter's safety, to fight back? Was I right to place my future in the hands of people society barely notices? Or should we have walked away? Let the system rot quietly. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from. And if you've ever seen someone underestimated, someone invisible, prove stronger than anyone expected, share that story. Because sometimes the ones cleaning up the mess are the only ones brave enough to fix it. Don't drink the water. That's what a little girl whispered to me one morning, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. And I'll tell you right now, that single warning from a child who wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the top floors of a hospital skyscraper saved my life. My name's Olivia, and for 20 years, I thought I was untouchable. Until I realized I'd been living in a cage built by people smiling to my face while slowly poisoning me behind closed doors. I remember my hand hovering over that glass pitcher in the boardroom. It was gleaming, sweating condensation placed perfectly at my seat, like it belonged to me. Geneva, the administrator with lipstick as red as blood, slid it closer and said, "You've been running on coffee all morning, Olivia." Her smile was thin, sharp, rehearsed. At the head of the table, Dr. Hale Charisma, wrapped in a tailored suit, watched me like a hawk. I'd been losing time forgetting names, feeling that fog he kept calling burnout. But in that moment I thought of the girl's napkin, just a sketch of a glass of water and a